Well, I was asked by quite a few people to give testimony when Gary asked me to come and preach tonight. So I went to Gary, I said, Gary, they want me to give my testimony, is that okay? And he said, well, what's the difference between that and me preaching? And I said, okay. So here I am. I'm going to start with a Psalms 121:8. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, now and forevermore. And He has. My earliest memories are of my mother and father trying to kill each other. They should have never procreated. They should have never been married. They shouldn't have even darkened each other's doorsteps. I'm glad they did because I'm here, but they should have never been. It took my mom almost 4 years before she finally left, and when she did, we did a lot of moving and hiding. I never was in the same place for more than 9 weeks at a time. Sometimes I think kindergarten year I went to 7 different schools. So it's been rough, and God was with me the whole time. I didn't know it. I didn't see it. My sister was one of the biggest drug runners in the state of Florida. I spent every summer with my sister because my mom worked. Even though I was there to see her, she worked full-time, 24-hour shifts, so I never really saw her. So I spent most of my time with my sister, and to say that I did unnice things was an understatement. Only because if I wanted to be around my sister and be loved by my sister, I had to do those unnice things. And it started as a very young child, because nobody looks at a kid. So then at 15, I met my husband. That stopped everything. I stopped going to visit my mom. I stopped being around my sisters and my other half siblings that were as bad as my sister. I stopped everything. The funny part is I met him at a bar at 15 years old. My dad was a MC DJ for a lot of recording artists, and I grew up in bars and nightclubs because that's also what he did. From 4 years old on, I don't remember a night or a weekend when I wasn't in a bar or a nightclub. So I met my husband at a bar. I was doing door charge for my dad. I was working. I had known them. He has an identical twin brother, and I had known them quite well for a while, and I was dating somebody else. And some guys came in and they cussed me up one way and down the other and called me everything but a good white girl. And my boyfriend that I was dating thought that it was funny. And my now husband, didn't think that was so funny and followed them out into the parking lot. So needless to say, at 15, I married my soulmate. We haven't always had it the easiest. At 20, I gave birth to our daughter. I wasn't supposed to have her. I miscarried 4 times before her. They didn't know why, they didn't understand. We didn't find out until she was born why. They found cancer cells. I had uterine cancer that I must have had for a couple years before I had my daughter. And we had nobody caught it. But I almost died having her. I hemorrhaged for 9 hours. And in the state of Florida, when that happens, they biopsy everything to see what's going on, and they found my cancer. When she was 2.5, she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. I thought my world came crashing down around me, because I am this young mom who hasn't had the best women figures. I had my stepmom, but I fought her tooth and nail. But let me tell you, that woman was a good Southern Baptist from Knoxville, Tennessee, and she could light it into you better than anybody I know. But I fought her tooth and nail. So I hadn't had the people to show me how I was supposed to deal with what I was dealing with. And the only thing I knew how to do was to keep going, because that's all I've ever done in my life, was no matter what hit me, just keep on walking it, keep on going. We spent 2 weeks in the hospital and came home and fought that for 18 years. And then January 15th, 2019, our daughter was taken from us. She was shot and killed in a domestic violence incident. To say my daughter was my world is an understatement. She was my best friend. We did everything together. We grew up together, doing everything together. So she was essentially, not only did you take my only child, but you took my best friend from me. Left me my beautiful granddaughter that all of y'all have had to listen to so many times. But it was, to say the least, probably to date, the worst and hardest thing that I've ever had to walk through. And what I didn't mention before is that I have been raped, I have been molested, I have been betrayed by those that were supposed to protect me. And I was the quiet kid and I just kept going. That's all I knew how to do, was to just keep going. You kept your head up and you just kept walking. So when she was taken from me, that was the hardest thing, but I didn't know God. I wasn't in church. I didn't believe. And I will tell you that for the longest time, I considered myself a pagan, because it was the only thing that described what I thought I knew. It was the only thing that described it. And so for the longest time, that's what I thought I was. And I didn't believe, he wasn't even a blip on my radar. But when she died, I was taking care of Ron Wallace's grandparents in their home, because they were in their 90s when I started taking care of them. And Sandra and Dean Trivet, which Sandra is their daughter, they called us. We had to go to Springfield to get Hadley. Now, I was informed that we had lost our daughter in the middle of a dirt road on my way to work. They had gone and gotten my husband's grandfather from the local diner, Hare Brothers, which I know quite a few people have been there, because I used to waitress there too. But Chris DeGase and his grandfather informed me with 2 Springfield detectives in the middle of the road, right in front of Bud Klinkenbeard's house. And I ran home, I jumped in my truck, his grandfather jumped in the truck, and before my truck hit park in our driveway, I was bolting inside the house, yelling to him, "There's police here, there's police here." Didn't explain what was going on. It's January, it's cold. My husband has on his boxers, and he comes running outside. Barefoot, no shirt, no clothes, comes running outside. I called Sandra and Dean on the phone and I said, "I'm sorry, you need to go upstairs and check on Mama so she doesn't burn down the house, but I won't be at work today because Cheyenne has been shot and killed." And I hung up the phone. Didn't give them any information. which afterwards I bawled because Dean and Sandra are like my parents, and I bawled because I guess Dean, it really hit him very, very hard. On our way back from Springfield, from being able to go and get her because she was now awarded the state, because they weren't told until she was at the hospital that there was somebody that could take care of her and would take care of her. So we had to go and get her and had to fight for her. So on the way back, Sandra calls me and says, "Hey, is it okay if we come to the house?" I said, "Sure," and I was passing their house at the time. We were just passing their house. I said, "Yeah," I said, "but we have to stop at Walmart." We had nothing. No diapers, no wipes. We weren't allowed to take anything from the home because it was a crime scene. They allowed the children's division to go in and get her swing and her feeding tube stuff, some of her feeding tube stuff, and her pump, and that was all they would allow her to take. So I said, "Sure, but we have to stop and get a few things." And she said, "Well, do you have enough to hold on until we get there?" And I said, "Yeah, maybe," because the hospital had given us half a dozen diapers and had put a footy sleeper on her so at least she wasn't cold, that kind of thing. And I said, "Sure." So we went home, which was, now I know by the grace of God, because I did not want to deal with anybody at Walmart because it had already gone around the town. Within minutes, people knew and I didn't yet. Half of Ava knew and I had yet to be informed. So we get to the house, we get her settled. I finally get her on a tube feed, and it had been more than 24 hours since she'd had a feed. So we get her set up, we get her fed, and they show up in a minivan. I mean, you guys know minivans. He had 3 adults in this minivan, 2 of which are not the smallest of adults. And how they fit 3 of them in this minivan, I have no idea, because it took them 45 minutes to unload this minivan into my house. I didn't buy diapers or wipes for I think a year, or over a year. So we went to Cross Point one day to say thank you. The first time we were gonna go, it snowed. And I think it was God's way of saying, okay, it's not time yet, you have to wait. Because when we went in, it was like that sermon that he was giving that day was meant specifically for us, because it was about the brokenhearted. And it was meant 100% for us. Every song that they sang and every word that he spoke was 100% for us. And we never left. I think the only time that I missed church was because of Hadley, and then when my mother passed away, when my stepmom passed away. But we never left. We've now moved on to, God has told us it was time to move on, and so we've moved on to other churches now, one of which being you guys. I really enjoy coming here on Sunday nights. And then we also go to Real Love in Seymour. Then we had to go through trial. We had to go through seeing her father, Hadley's father, across a table once a month, sometimes twice a month. We had children's division court, we had criminal court. We had to listen to them blame it on our daughter, that our 89-pound, 4'9" daughter killed herself basically while they were fighting and arguing over a gun, which my daughter had gun training. She would have never fought over a gun. She would have picked up the kid and ran out of the house. That would have not even been a thought in her head to fight over a gun. So a year later, he got bonded out in February. This happened in January. He was bonded out February 14th of 2019, and got to be out for a year. Came to every meeting, every court hearing, everything. So we were having to come face to face with him. But we were lucky. We had some really good Christian people that were with us every step of the way. And of course, I came closer and closer. And I prayed more, and I did more. And then it came to trial. And it was only supposed to be a 2-day trial. The prosecutor said it was a slam dunk. I mean, how many people have heard that on the cop shows and everything else? Oh, it's a slam dunk, we got it, no problem, right? It wasn't so much of a slam dunk because Greene County, Springfield, does not call out forensics if the person says that they've shot and killed the person. So his attorney picked apart everything that I knew, because I'm a big forensics nerd. That's what I wanted to do before I became a teacher, was forensic pathology, so I knew a lot about it. And they were picking apart the little drops, aeration drops, which means you're coughing up what's left of the air in your lungs and what's filling your lungs, so they were picking that apart, his attorney was. So after court that day, the judge says, are you sure this is the way you want to go? Because the only instructions they were going to give to the jury was first murder in the first. Involuntary murder. No, voluntary murder in the first. They were going for the full thing, 20 plus years. And then the judge says, are you sure that's what you want to do? You don't want to give other instructions? And the prosecutor goes, no, we know we can get this. And the judge shook his head. And so they called us into the office. And since becoming a Christian, I had never heard my husband use more curse words in my life than I heard that day. Because when we walked into the office, they said, do you want to give him a plea deal? It's the first thing they said to us. And my husband says, you told us it was a slam dunk. You told us it was all, this was just preliminary, basically. It was all ready to go in the bag. And he said, I can't do it. And he walked out, dragging me behind him. And I'm just like, okay. And the prosecutor, as I'm being dragged out the door, says, I'll call you in an hour. And I said, well, you gotta give us a little more than an hour, because that's what it takes me to get home. Actually, it took us 37 minutes and some change, because he was angry, so his foot was a little heavy. But when we got home and everybody got out, his brother was with us and some of our friends were with us, everybody gets out of the vehicle, and I looked at him, I said, what do you want to do? The prosecutor's gonna be calling any time now, what do you want to do? And he goes, you make the decision, I can't. So not only am I a new Christian, but now I have to figure out how to navigate that. And we live on a very long driveway. It's a very long private driveway that sits along a cow pasture. And of course, it's cold because once again, this is February. It's cold, it's been snowing, it's been raining, it's wet, it's freezing. And I walk down our drive and I walk out into the middle of the cow pasture and I fall to my knees in the middle of the cow pasture. Cows around me in the middle of the cow pasture. And I just start praying. And I said, God, what do I do? What do I do? You know, I don't know what to do. Please help me. I'm lost. And all of a sudden, I heard all you wanted was for him to have to say he did it on purpose. And I said, okay, you're right. That's all I ever wanted, was for him to say he did it purposely, so that his family would quit treating us the way that they had treated us. We had been, all except for his grandma and grandpa. They were the sweetest, but we had been stalked. We had been told that it was our daughter's fault that she was dead, and God, you know, that's what needed to happen anyway. She deserved it. We had been raked through the coals, and so all I really wanted was for him to have to say he purposely did it. And so when they called, I said, give him the deal. And the prosecutor said, are you sure? After, you know, listening to my husband yell and scream, they didn't think I was gonna say yes. But we didn't know. We never heard back from the prosecutor that night. So when we went to court the next morning, we all showed up like it was supposed to be court, and we're all sitting there waiting to go into the courtroom. And they're marching. There's this little room right next to the courtroom. And him and his attorney and his father went in, and they're marching his family in and out, and everybody's coming out crying. And I looked at the victim's advocate who was sitting right beside me, and I said, I think he took the deal. And she's like, I don't know. We weren't told. We don't know if he took it or not. And so we went into the courtroom, and judge came in without me calling in the jury and said, you know, I hear that you want to allocute. And he said yes, and he had to stand up and explain that yes, he had done it. He had gotten mad because Hadley wouldn't go to sleep. And Cheyenne was asking for help, and he got angry, so he shot and killed her. So when they did that, he was getting to say goodbye to his family one last time, because they immediately hooked him up. And I thought that when we were talking to the victim's advocate, she said they usually give them a few days to go home, get things together, you know, get things worked out, and then they have to report to Greene County Jail. And I said, okay, and I was okay with that. But then they immediately put him in handcuffs. And this is a kid that I'd known for 5 years. He dated my daughter for 5 years. And so, I'm a mama. This kid was like my own child. And it wrecked me. And so we got up and walked out of the courtroom. And I'm bawling. And I turned around, I was talking to the victim's advocate, and I was saying I didn't want that. I didn't want them to hook him up. His 16-year-old or his 15-year-old sister was there. And I didn't want her to see that. I didn't want her to have that picture of her brother in her head. You know, I am a softie at heart. I don't like people to be hurt. And about that time, his attorney comes out and says, well, I'll tell the family. And I said, no, I'm not saying this for them. I'm saying everything that I say because I was out there talking to her and I was crying, saying how much I did not want what had just happened to happen. And he said that he would tell the family because, and I said, no, there was no reason. I said, I'm letting out my frustrations and my hurt because that needs to be said, because we were told one thing and something else happened. Fast forward 5 years, and we get told that though we were told he had to serve the full 10 years that he allocated for, fast forward 5 years and he gets out. And his home plan is Gainesville. Luckily, I have not come face to face with him yet because it might try my Christian in me, and I don't know if I'm ready for that. I've forgiven him. I really have. It took me 4 years to get to that point. And then I fell on my knees at a encounter that we went to, that was for addicts, that we worked with addicts. And I fell on my knees, and Brother Casey came up and he prayed over me, and I said, how do I forgive that one thing? I've forgiven everything else. I forgave his family for everything they put us through, and all of that. I said, how do I forgive this one thing? And he looked at me and said, how do you not? How do you not? God asked us to forgive. How do you not forgive when you're at the place that you're at? Because during this time, I started taking classes to become a pastor because I felt like that's where God was leading me. And at the same time, he was leading me in 2 different directions. So I forgave, and I was being led to become a pastor, but I was also being led to open a domestic violence shelter. And it's a farm-based thing, and I had not had a dream of my daughter the whole time since she had died. And one night she came to me in a dream and said, Mom, I have this one shot to come and talk to you. And I said, what are you doing here? It was like I was self-aware, but I wasn't. I was sleeping, but I said, what are you doing here? And she says, God gave me this one chance to come and talk to you. And I said, what about? I thought it was going to be some profound life, the mysteries of the world. God was going to rain upon me for everything that I had been doing. But it was, Mom, you're supposed to open it. I said, but I don't know. She said, you're supposed to open it, and it's going to be Sweet Pea House. Because her nickname was Sweet Pea. And then my husband's grandfather started calling Hadley Sweet Pea when she was born, without knowing that my dad had always called Cheyenne Sweet Pea, and we had lost my dad 10 months to the day after we lost Cheyenne. So I said, well, I don't know, can I do this? I looked at her, I said, baby girl, I don't know if I can do this. She said, Mom, how do you think you can't? You're the strongest person I've ever met in my life. You were the strongest person I had ever met. I don't know how you couldn't do it. So I woke up and I looked at Mike the next morning and I said, okay, we have a problem and you have to help me figure out how to fix it. I said, we have to open up a domestic violence shelter, and I thought that his eyes got the size of paper plates. They were huge. And he says, okay. And I said, but it's got to be on a farm. I see it. We're walking in gardens, and I told him about the whole dream, And so he said, okay. And he's like, where are we going to put this place? And I said, here. And he's like, we don't have any property. Where are we putting this place? Well, 2 years ago, his grandfather passed away and left us 10.5 acres, knowing that that's what we wanted to do to it. At one point, he wanted to give us the whole 140, and we told him no. There was no way I was turning 140 acres into a domestic violence shelter. I said, Pop, it's gonna be hard enough working the 10 and a half into, and keeping everybody copacetic and not fighting, not arguing, because you put that many women in one place with a bunch of kids, what do you think's gonna happen? So, God led me to, in 6 years, it's been 6 years now, from not believing in God to having to take my daughter from me to bring me to him. God literally had to take my daughter from me to bring me to him so that I would believe. And here I am. I've followed. I am probably one of the most obedient people you will ever meet when it comes to the Lord. Because what he says, I don't care if it's a snap your fingers type of moment, I snap to and I go do it. And I feel like that's what I'm required to do. So now, with the Sweet Pea house we're trying to get built, we have now, he led me to open up a resale shop to help fund the domestic violence shelter. So now we're into that too. So he has taken me in 6 years on so many journeys that I never thought that I would go on. I never thought that, because I used to laugh at the people that talked about God, and when I was asked by Ron Wallace and Dean and Sandra Trivet and Marvin and Faye Ray, who were yelling at me constantly that I needed to go to church, I would say, okay, it's my lunch break, I'm gonna go outside, I'll see you in 10 minutes, and I now thank them more than anything, because if I didn't have those people pouring into me all this time, I don't think that I would be where I am. I don't think I would have healed as well as I have healed. I'm able to tell my story without completely dissolving into a puddle, which I'm told is a feat upon itself, that most moms wouldn't be able to. So I am here, and I am thankful for the Lord, and I praise him every day for everything that he's done. Sometimes my testimony is sometimes a lot funnier than it turned out this time. I'm telling you, he did a lot to me this time. So I have one passage or one, and everybody knows it because it's said so much, but it's Philippians 4:13. And really that is how I live today, because I can do everything that I do, I can do only because Christ strengthens me.
Yeah.
So, thank you. I am happy to answer questions, by the way.